How is everyone doing? First speaker of the day, so a bit of a warm-up. So yeah, my name's Nick Waters. I write for Bellingcat, or contributor towards Bellingcat. Yeah, if you think the talk is worthwhile, you can follow me on Twitter later as well. Okay, so I'm here to talk about open source data and how it's changed the way we interact with conflict. Because within the last few years, with the advent of smartphones, of social media, and Web 2.0, all that kind of stuff, we're getting information from conflict that we simply would not have had before. So for example, in Syria, you can follow hourly updates of how the front lines are changing. You can get media from the ground as events are happening. So if there's a big airstrike, you'll be getting pictures and videos literally minutes after it happens. And this has changed the way we can actually look at conflict and also the way we can investigate and verify war crimes. It's also interesting that this kind of open source data isn't just used for this. You've even got cases where, for example, if people are familiar with 4chan and the poll messaging board on 4chan, they found some images that had come out of Syria of a militant training camp. They geolocated where that camp was, and then via Twitter passed on that information to the Russian MOD, and there was an airstrike on that location a few hours later. So actually that's crowdsourcing actionable intelligence from the ground from people who aren't even in Syria, who are just random people on the internet. So this is actually an incredibly powerful tool that I don't think has been fully developed or properly understood yet. So today I'm going to take you through some of the techniques that we use to verify and investigate events in these conflict areas. Cool. So the first thing I'm going to take you through is what's called geolocation. So it's looking at media that comes out from the ground and then working out exactly where that event took place. Because if you can verify that something took place in that place, or the place that they said it did, and in the right time, then it's probably a good chance that it's true. Okay, so this video, or videos like this started appearing in Syria near the beginning of the war. So why is this important? What you can see is basically an improvised munition. It's an oil barrel, or a barrel rather, filled with explosives. This one didn't actually detonate, but as you can see, people are fascinated by what it actually is. Now, the point about barrel bombs is that they are inherently indiscriminate. Basically, you fill a barrel full of explosives, light the fuse, and then push it out of the back of a helicopter. So really, the most accurate thing you can hit villages, small towns, that kind of stuff. You can have absolutely no real kind of control over exactly where it lands. So when these images started coming out, we also started getting, or we identified this munition was being used. There was also criticism of the idea that barrel bombs are being used. So, for example, RT and a lot of other Russian-related media outlets were printing articles like this, basically saying that barrel bombs were not real. It's just a figment of our imagination and the imagination of the guys on the ground. However, we then started getting even more media coming out. So you can see that's a helicopter, and out pops out something that does not look like a standard munition. You can't see any tail fin.
Hey.
But again, it's not that clear. You know, it could still actually be a conventional bomb that's being dropped from the helicopter. However, then they found this piece of evidence, or this video that was posted online. If it works. There we go. So what you can see is a barrel bomb being dropped out over a Syrian town. As you can see, they just light the fuse and lob it out the back, and it's going to land somewhere on that town. They don't know where, they don't really care, as long as it lands on the town itself. So this video was allegedly taken from a helicopter that was shot down. However, there are a lot of questions about its validity. You know, was this actually filmed in Syria? Could it have been faked? And there are a lot of questions surrounding it. And what we did is we used geolocation to show actually, yes, this is a town in Syria. We can identify which town it is. Cool. So if you go on Google Earth, you can zoom in. You can actually find the exact town where this barrel bomb was dropped. And then if you overlay the picture that we took from the video, you can see that it fits exactly. That was a town in Syria, and they were just throwing a barrel bomb out over a town. Okay, there we go. So that's it. It wasn't fake. It was filmed in Syria, and we can prove it because, yeah, you can see the comparison between Google Earth and the YouTube video, all through just open source data that's been posted on the internet. Okay, another example of how geolocation is important is the Caesar photographs. Caesar was, or is, the code name of a guy who defected from the Syrian regime. He was a mortuary worker whose job it was to take photos of the bodies of people who'd been killed or who had died at this military hospital. And there are tens of thousands of these images which he smuggled out from Syria over time before eventually fleeing from Syria. And the photos show clear signs of torture, including beatings, gouged out eyes, and close-range shots to the back of the head. So it became very, very important because these photos were a huge collection of evidence showing that torture was definitively going on within Assad's regime. Again, there were questions about the validity of these photos and whether they actually showed what they did, and whether they were actually taken in the location that Caesar said they were taken. So luckily, some of the photographs actually show the background of where these images were taken. Obviously, within this photograph, the bodies have been cropped out. They're in the lower corner of the screen. So what we want to do is to actually work out exactly where this image was taken so we can show that actually these images were real. So one of the really important things about this is in the top left-hand corner of the screen, it's quite difficult to see, but you can see the hill there. And then you've also got what appear to be possibly two antennae on the top of the hill. It's very, very faint, very distinct, or very indistinct, but it does seem there is something there. So we knew that Caesar said these photos were taken in Damascus, at a military hospital in Damascus. So we started looking around in Damascus, military hospitals, and if we zoom into this particular location, that's using Google Earth, looking at the ground view, we believe we found the location. So you can see that the hill seems to match where it was before, and you've also, with putting an overlay of infrastructure, which you can do on Google Earth, you can play around with it, or used to be able to do, the new one has come out, you can see where the two antennae are. You can overlay the image on top of it, and it fits. But again, this isn't really that definitive. You know, it's Google Earth. I've had false positives using this technique before. So yeah, you can compare the two. But again, yeah, as I said, we can get false positives using this. But looking at Google Earth from the bird's eye view and also the image, we can identify things that are identical, that show this is the location where that photograph was taken. So for example, in the yellow boxes, or each one of the colored boxes represents a colored box which is in the photo here. So we can see the buildings to the left and to the right. We can see the greenery, although that's not usually a good thing to use when you're geolocating because it can change quite easily. You can see the two buildings in blue and orange there. You can see the building outlined in purple, which is out there. And also you've got the antenna. And because the satellite imagery was taken at the same time that Caesar took his photo, we can actually even see the two buses are lined up in exactly the same place. So we are absolutely certain that these photos were taken in this military hospital in Damascus. And there's something else we noticed about this imagery. When you look at actually where it's located within Damascus, you've actually got Assad's presidential palace just up the hill. So when you look at exactly how far away it is, it's just over 500 meters away from where all these bodies were processed. Cool. Okay, big data sets. So that's geolocation. This is locating artillery strikes in Ukraine. So I'll give you the background of this this section of the presentation. In 2014, Ukrainian forces launched an offensive against pro-Russian separatists and made significant territorial gains in eastern Ukraine, gaining control over a large portion of the Ukrainian border, or Russian-Ukrainian border. However, on the morning of the 11th of July 2014, the situation changed in a big way. A massive and unexpected artillery barrage in the eastern Ukrainian region killed 30 Ukrainian soldiers and wounded over 100. And in the days and weeks that followed, the units on the border were subjected to dozens of additional artillery attacks. And by late July 2014, this massive bombardment had reversed the Ukrainian gains and contributed to the encirclement of portions of the Ukrainian armed forces. And basically, we started looking at, where's it gone? Basically, a separatist offensive then took place across eastern Ukraine simultaneously with these artillery attacks, leading to separatists capturing much of the Russian-Ukrainian border along the areas of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. And artillery was a really key part of this counteroffensive. And we believe that it was Russian artillery that was supporting the Ukrainian separatists, or the Russian-supported Ukrainian separatists. So what we did, we started looking at the crater fields at the time. So what you're looking at is a field in Ukraine, and each one of these pockmarks, of these hundreds and hundreds of different pockmarks, is where a rocket landed and has exploded and has thrown up dirt and created a crater. And we noticed that these craters were a particular shape, and we wondered if maybe this indicated where the artillery was actually firing from. Because if you've got a rocket coming in at a certain angle, like it throws dirt in a particular way. And we found that actually, yeah, you could. So we basically located these artillery crater fields, which are caused by artillery fire, and analyzed each one of these craters using these images, which we found in an old US Army field manual, actually. So this is used to, or these were used by the US Army to locate artillery and where it's been firing from. So as you can see, when an artillery came in, it would come in, or a rocket would come in, it would come in, explode, and then throw out earth in a particular orientation. And for a different kind of fuse, so for when it exploded in a slightly different way, it would leave another distinctive type of crater, and you could again work out which way it was towards the piece of artillery. So what we started to do is we applied this technique to the crater fields that we found in Ukraine. And we found that they worked. And using, or you can see the triangular shape of it, fits with the triangular shape within this image. And so we could actually work out roughly which way the artillery was pointing, or which way the artillery was firing the rockets from. And we started doing this to pretty much every single crater field we could find. And again, you can see the different shaped one indicating a different type of fuse. We applied again to this one. Cool. So I'll show you one particular attack that we identified and that we analyzed. And so this took place in 14th of July 2014. Okay, so in the 14th of July 2014, an anti-terrorist operation was taking place by the Ukrainian armed forces. And they got hit by a very, very heavy artillery barrage. It was suspected that the origin of this artillery barrage was actually from Russia. So we managed to find satellite imagery that was taken on the 16th of July 2014, and we found an extensive crater field around where this attack took place. It totaled 330 craters, and we checked out every single one of those craters, applied that technique that I just showed you, and worked out roughly where we believe the artillery was coming from. So as you can see, that's the crater field, and we have the different kinds of craters within that crater field. Cool. Okay, so we counted them, applied the analysis, and we worked out the average of where the average trajectory was coming from. This was done to be 193 degrees, 0.97 to the south-southwest, with 180 degrees being due south, which is that way. Okay, so we followed the direction line indicated, and about 14.6 kilometers from the crater field, we found burn marks, which were visible at a location, which is on Russian territory and approximately 750 meters away from the Ukrainian border. And we believe that this is the firing site inside Russia. Okay. So basically, I need to explain something about Russian artillery, which wasn't immediately obvious. Basically, it's a series of tubes on the back of a truck. When you rotate those tubes towards whatever you want to fire at, and then you fire the rockets. And obviously, being rockets, when you fire them, a great big flame comes out the back and makes burn marks. And when you're firing them in agricultural fields, they'll scorch the ground, scorch the grass, scorch the crops, whatever you want, and leave quite a distinctive mark, which you can see here. So this is the location where we traced the angle of the attacks back to. As you can see, you've got five very distinctive burn marks, indicating where we believe the artillery fired from. You've also got the line of where we believe the artillery came in, and the line where it went out again, as well as the firing direction. And this lined up exactly with where our crater analysis indicated the firing point would be. So we also tracked the vehicles. We followed the tractors they left in the fields, and they came from Russia, and they went back into Russia. Although, yeah, the firing point is in Russia, so they headed back into Russia. And we did this start doing this to crater fields that we could find across eastern Ukraine. So as you can see, the yellow line is the Russian-Ukrainian border. And as you can see, we started locating firing points that were very distinctly within Russia, that were not Ukrainian separatist firing points. And we managed to back this up because people started posting videos of these artillery firing. I mean, if you're a civilian on the ground, this is quite a notable occurrence. So as you can see, the rockets being fired.
Вот так вот весело в городе Гуково, ребята, хуячит град.
So using the principles of geolocation that I showed you earlier, what we did is we worked out where the video was taken, and therefore where exactly the firing line was. And it lined up with our analysis of the crater fields and direction of fire and of the burn marks that we identified. So this was taken amongst other steps to verify our findings. And then we started doing this across the whole eastern Ukrainian region, and we identified 518 crater fields indicating attack sites, and as a result of those, 305 potential firing positions that were judged to be possibly related to the cross-border attacks. As you can see, a huge amount of them came from inside Russia. So these are target sites in blue, and the red indicate where we believe artillery was firing from. And although some are within Ukraine, many of them are very distinctly within Russia. Cool. So this is the eventual table of that information that we put together of this data set. And as you can see, we identified potentially 262 firing sites. And yeah, they were mostly inside Russia. Okay, so we've done this, or we've applied this method to, or this kind of method to other sources, or other events. So, for example, Russian airstrikes in Syria in 2015. So for the previous section, what we had to do, we had to go out and find all that information. We had to spend a lot of time looking on Google Maps, and we had to find media that was on the ground, like go on VK, go on social media, find out images of artillery firing. And this, most of the information came to us. So in 2015, Russia intervened on behalf of President Assad in Syria, and they had the narrative that they promoted the narrative that they were fighting ISIS. And there are suspicions about who they're actually bombing. So we started gathering and analyzing videos of Russian airstrikes posted by the Russian Ministry of Defense on YouTube. So it's all open source data. Didn't have to use any kind of nefarious means to get it. The imagery and the videos came to us. So between the 30th of September and the 21st of October, we identified 60 airstrikes, analyzed them, including the location, the claimed target, whether there was ISIS actually in the area, and the claimed date of the strike, and the date of the upload using Amnesty International's YouTube data viewer. And then we analyzed them and put them into a report. We weren't able to identify the location of 9 of those, so that gives us a data set of 51 airstrikes. Okay, so it's an example of what we're looking at. So as you can see, posted by the Russian Military Defense. This one was taken in December 2015, but it's a really good example because it's really, really clear about what they're showing. And it's really easy to geolocate as well. So as you can see, I don't know if you can see that in the bottom left, it's claimed that it was an airstrike against an oil refinery. The problem is that we found that a lot of the videos being posted on this YouTube page were actually incorrect, either because the location was wrong or because they were claiming to hit a target that they weren't. So, for example, this is they say this is an oil refinery. This is a video of that strike. And what we did, we applied, again, geolocation, because we love that kind of stuff, worked out exactly where it was, and located it inside Syria. So on the left-hand side, what you can see is imagery from the Russian MOD's own YouTube, and then on the right, what you can see is the same imagery from Google Earth, or imagery of the same location on Google Earth. As you can see, you've got the road on the right-hand side that comes in, the same thing. You've got the road at the top, road coming on the left. It's all there. You've got the purification of these circular structures, the building on the left-hand side, and also structures down at the bottom. This is definitely 100% the same location. And what we did when we actually looked into it and found out what this facility actually was, it wasn't an oil refinery, it was a water purification plant, which is incidentally hitting water infrastructure is a war crime. So that's an example of where the target they were saying, or that they were saying was incorrect. But we also found a lot of the time that when they said they were striking ISIS, they actually weren't. And we know that because the Russian MOD actually provided a map of where they believed ISIS was, which they posted on their Twitter feed. So what we can see is General Andrei Kartapolov and the map that he's holding up. And if you look closely at the map, there's a darker region outlined within Syria. And that is where they believe ISIS is at that time. So what we did, we took that map and we overlaid it on top of Google Maps. And then we placed the airstrikes on it. So this is not entirely the way through the investigation, but you can see the pins indicate where strikes are. And the map shows where ISIS is located. And the immediate thing that stands out to you when you look at this map is that there appears to be one airstrike in Raqqa, which is held by ISIS, and then a whole load of airstrikes that are not hitting areas under ISIS control. So, yeah, we looked into each one of these, verified where it was, and we found a grand total. As I said, we couldn't locate 9, so it is a marginal error. But we found that there was one strike which hit an ISIS area out of 51 that they claimed hit ISIS, or when they said they were fighting ISIS. So clearly it's not really, they weren't really telling the truth. Okay, so when people pointed this out to the Russian Ministry of Defense, they didn't really like it, but they also, interestingly, changed their narrative. So when it was started, people pointing out that actually they weren't hitting areas under ISIS control, they weren't actually fighting ISIS, they were concentrating on the rebels and actually allowing ISIS to operate where they wanted, they began changing the kind of words they were using to describe their targets. So what you can see is the words used to describe the targetry when they posted these videos. So green is the use of the word ISIS, or IS. As you can see, they start off claiming they're striking IS, but then actually starting to change what they're saying and beginning to use the word militants instead. So they're striking militants instead of striking ISIS. So their whole narrative changed because we pointed out the fact that they weren't actually fighting ISIS, which is quite interesting. Okay, and the final thing I'm going to show to you, this was not done by Bellingcat. I want to point out, I want to make very clear, this is done by Forensic Architecture, who are an incredible group. They're based at Goldsmiths University in London, and they do some incredible stuff with open source information. So what I'm going to show you is a video that they created that looked at the M2 hospital bombings in Aleppo, and it's a pinnacle of what you can do with open source information, recreating events on the ground exactly as they happened. Is it possible to turn down the lights a bit? If not, don't worry.
From June to December 2016, according to the Syrian American Medical Society, the Omar bin Abdulaziz Hospital, also known as M2, has been subject to 14 strikes by pro-government forces. The hospital has been damaged from inside and out. Video clips and still images taken in and around the hospital allow us to reconstruct some of the consequences of these strikes. Each photograph captures only a small part of the building, but composing and cross-referencing them allows us to reconstruct the architecture of the building and locate the images of the bombing. We locate the photographs with the model. The model then becomes the medium through which we can navigate between the different images and videos of the incidents. There are a number of CCTV cameras in the hospital that are continuously on, capturing every strike. We locate each camera and its orientation in the building. We integrate footage from the CCTV cameras, handheld videos, and photographs to reconstruct the interior spaces. This video, placed within the model, is from the strike on July 16th, 2016. Locating each video clip in space provides a tangible link between them, verifying their place and constructing their relation to each other. We follow the civilians as they move through the targeted building. On the ground floor, there are 4 CCTV cameras, and each captures the consequence of the strikes. This CCTV camera captures one of the corridors leading to an exit from the building. This video of medical staff transporting a wounded person to an ambulance provides an essential link between inside and outside. As they load the wounded person into an ambulance, we can see the disposition of buildings outside, a fact that helps us verify the location of the building. According to the UN, by mid-August 2016, Omar bin Abdulaziz Hospital was one of only 3 hospitals in Aleppo offering intensive care, and the only hospital left with a pediatric department caring for children. 2016 was the most dangerous year for health workers in Syria. 14 strikes targeted Omar bin Abdulaziz M2 Hospital in a span of 6 months. June 3rd, June 14th, July 14th, July 16th, August 1st, August 5th, August 11th, August 14th, September 23rd, September 26th, September 28th, November 18th, December 4th, December 14th.
So for me, that's the kind of pinnacle of what you can do using information that is open source, that's propagated over social media. And you can recreate exactly what happened at the time using that information. My name's Nick Waters. I'll take any questions if you want. Cool.
Great, thanks Nick. We've got about 5 minutes for questions, so if anybody's got one, I'll bring the mic and then everyone can hear the question.
Nick, do you ever find yourself investigating claims that you would see on Russia Today, who is saying, oh, the US is doing X, Y, Z, that the US says they aren't doing? Do you find yourself on a particular side? Or what drives you?
No, we've... so this is like one of the points about Bellingcat. We've concentrated a lot on Russia and on Syria, precisely because Russia's lied so much. But we've also focused on events that have, or incidents that have taken place from America, for example. So a big one was the bombing of a mosque in the Aleppo province, which Bellingcat just released a report on. We also did one on what I believe is like a raid that went very wrong in Yemen. But the problem is there's not very much social media around it, so we can only really investigate what is brought to us. So yeah, we do investigate allegations against pretty much everybody, but we can only investigate where there is media of that event. And secondly, the reason we concentrate on Russia so much is because they lie quite a lot.
And I also wondered if you did anything with the recent chemical attacks that, of course, the regime denied. And would that information eventually feed into UN investigations, or is it purely from a journalistic point of view that you work?
So previous investigations, including one in particular I did on a strike on the water for Damascus, did find its way into, or was used, I know, by the UN in one of their investigations. And we've written quite a bit about the recent sarin attack. You can see all the articles on the website, but it's a huge list of them. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to go through that because I haven't been really part of that investigation, so I don't know the ins and outs that well. But if you're interested, there are a whole bunch of articles on the Bellingcat website.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to ask Nick a question?
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for that talk. Could you expand a little bit more on the technology tools that you use?
On which?
On the tools that you use in your research.
Yeah.
For instance, maybe pattern matching for those aerial images. How do you match them onto it?
So primarily we use like Google Earth is a really good one. The old one was much better because with Google Earth you can, as I said, you can go down to ground's eye view. You can see historical imagery as well. So instead of just on Google Maps having like access to one, you can go back in time and see all the different types of imagery from the last 10 years or so. We also have access to Digital Globe as well. So that means we have like really up-to-date satellite photos. And in areas where people are interested in, unsurprisingly like Syria, you can actually sometimes get updated imagery like every 7 days. So you can verify when strikes actually took place within a window of about a week, because you can see the damage that was not there before, and then 7 days later is there. And you can see that on a website called TerraServer. They watermark everything, but you can still see the most up-to-date imagery, which is quite useful if you're trying to do it for free. In terms of everything else, like nothing really. Like, we don't use anything really that special. Some of the guys do some of the stuff like that you saw in forensic architecture, like build models, but that's like at a technical level way higher than what I can do. So I mostly just use open source tools like Google Earth and Wikimapia as well is a really good one. Cool.
I was curious, do you sometimes use your data then to go back to sort of questionable news sources and challenge their reporting, and if yes, what's your experience in how they react?
Who react? Like the media organizations, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. Like how they react varies from organization to organization. Like some will print corrections, some just attack us. So again, RT and Sputnik attack us quite a lot, which is slightly depressing. But like we challenge a lot of stuff of media that comes out anyway. So sometimes you see media being recycled. So for example, when Aleppo city was under siege and was actually collapsing, the rebel lines were collapsing, a lot of media was coming out that wasn't actually from Aleppo. They'd been posted a year previously or from a different location. And we were verifying that as it went along and saying either, you know, this is real or this is not real. This happened in Idlib province 2 years ago. So we try and verify as much as possible, but because of the amount of media that's being produced, it's difficult to catch all of it effectively. We can't catch all of it, physically impossible, because almost all of us are volunteers anyway.
Cool. Okay, any last questions for Nick? No? Oh, one more. Sorry.
After all these strikes and monitoring everything, are there any preventive measures taken? Is it useful? The methods are useful to take any preventive measures to prevent the attacks?
Could you hold the mic a little bit closer?
To prevent the attacks from happening.
Yeah.
You know, after all that tracking, is it useful?
Probably not, in terms of actually having an effect. So as you saw, we influenced the narrative that Russia was propagating during their initial airstrike campaign within Syria, but it doesn't stop them doing whatever they want to do. Effectively, like when you have control of an area, you have no one opposing you, there's no physical force to stop that happening. You can effectively do what you want inside the territory. So Assad's been using chemical warfare, not just on the latest sarin attack, but also pretty, like every month or so there's been a chemical warfare attack, but it's been using chlorine rather than sarin. And so we can identify it, we can point it out, and then hopefully sometime down the line this will have an effect and maybe someone will get prosecuted. But in terms of actually being able to stop stuff happening, not really. I can imagine it having an effect on governments that react to public pressure. So the US government, maybe not necessarily now so much, but certainly other governments would react to public pressure. But the ones that commit the worst kind of crimes that we see would not be affected by it because they don't react to public pressure.
Great. Let's take the opportunity to thank Nick again for his very interesting talk. And now we're going to move on to our next talk. So if I can just get the AV guys to help us swap over.